Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulil Kareem. Ala alihi ashabi ajmain. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear students, welcome to the live session for spring 2025 semester. We have a live session now on assignment writing guidelines. We have with us our very experienced and worthy Sister Yasmin too. She is the research coordinator from the Directorate of Research and Publications for International Open University. Sister Yasmin too, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Barakallahu feekum for the introduction and welcome to all the students / attendees to this session. So with your permission, let's begin.
Yes, sister, please, you may begin, inshallah.
Okay, jazakallah khair, barakallahu feekum. So once again, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, dear students. Today's topic is going to cover effective assignment writing and tips on how to improve your academic writing and language for when you're doing assignments / research articles, and later on in your degree, the dissertation, or as we like to also call it, your degree thesis. So first of all, before we go into the particulars of the assignment itself, I would like to remind all of you that before undergoing any new task, before taking on any new course, assignment, and degree, anything at all, being a student of knowledge, the first and foremost thing you always need to do is check your intentions, why you are doing this. If your intention is not at the right spot, you need to renew your intention, do the task at hand with sincerity, with the aim and the objective to not only tick off another box on your list of things to do in your course, but to genuinely research and understand the topic that's being assigned to you and fulfill all the requirements of genuinely furthering your knowledge and expanding your understanding of the topic. So coming to that, the first thing you need to do is understand the assignment at hand. So in your academic calendar, when the assignment questions are released, you have your question, and it usually is a carefully structured statement that requires you to cover the topic at hand in a certain manner. So the first thing you need to do is always analyze the prompt, or what we call the assignment question itself. You need to carefully read the assignment to understand what is being asked of you and what the key requirements and expectations are for the assignment. Then you move on to identifying the key themes or looking at the keywords or the main topic to guide your research and thesis development. And then you need to clarify your objectives for what you intend to argue, because it's going to be a topic and it's possible that you are asked to provide evidence in light to either support a certain claim or refuse a certain claim. So you need to have clear objectives for what you want to argue and how you are going to support your arguments. So moving on to research and planning. Before sitting down and starting to write the assignment, I always like to tell students that more than 60% of the work is actually conducting research before you sit down to write. So after understanding what is being asked of you, what the area of your assignment is, what subtopic it falls under, you need to sit down and utilize academic sources such as books, journals, and websites, reputable ones, not random websites. We're going to talk a little bit more about how to identify what's credible and what's not credible in one of the later slides. So you need to gather relevant information, which is going to help you put together your assignment itself. Then I always like to tell students to sit down and create an outline, make a mind map, organize your ideas, because when you are writing or sitting down to write an assignment, there are going to pop into your head many things regarding maybe something that you already took in the course. Maybe your assignment is related to a topic that your instructor already touched on in some of the modules. So you already have an idea of what you feel about the topic, what evidences you want to present, how you're going to structure your research. But the human mind is a very miraculous thing that it doesn't necessarily work the same way each time you sit down to do something. So it might be possible that the minute you look and read your assignment question, you have certain ideas or certain points that you feel are very crucial to, include in your assignment. But if for some reason you don't write those down right away or organize the ideas in your head, they might skip at a later point when you're actually sitting down to start writing. So it's always important to organize your ideas. If you have any popping points that come into your mind, you just, note them down. For every assignment of every course, I like to instruct students to have maybe a little notebook or maybe separate sections of the same notebook, and you can detail main points or important aspects you would like to touch on in your assignment, so that when you come back, because it's necessarily not possible to sit down, read the assignment question, and then finish everything in one go. It 99% of the time, you sit down, let's say one day, the day your assignment questions are released, and you look at all the assignment questions and you just close them down and you say, let's, for example, you're going to work on your first assignment in, let's say, 3 days. So it's very important that before you sit down to actually work on your assignment, if there's anything that pops into your head right then and there as you are going through the assignment question, that you are able to write it down so it doesn't get lost later on. So detailing main points and detailing supporting arguments that will guide you later on when you're sitting down to do the writing is very important. And then, of course, because we are talking about self-paced learning and a degree or a semester where you need to do all the timetabling by yourself in order to be able to, cover everything at the time that it's supposed to be covered. Time management is one of the most essential aspects of being able to deliver a good assignment. Because if you don't establish a reasonable timeline for completing, let's say, if you are enrolled in 6 courses, you have, let's, for example, say 6 assignments, but you just don't have those assignments by themselves. You also have your module tests. You might have your midterms anywhere around the time that your assignments are due or are released. So it's not always only the assignments that you need to take care of. So you have to establish a reasonable timeline to structure in all the phases of making your assignment, as well as the other things in your degree that are going on. So what I like to tell students is it's always good, since you can see in your academic calendar what date your assignment questions are going to be released, it's always good to do beforehand a little bit more reading and a little bit more studying, so you are a little ahead on your modules, so that at the time when your assignment questions actually come out, you have a little relaxation, because at the back of your mind, you know that you are ahead in your modules and you can dedicate a little bit more time towards actually taking care of writing up your assignments in a good manner. So that will eliminate stress during your semester. So moving on to the writing style and language when it comes to assignments. So assignments at this part in your study, whether it be, essay style assignments or research paper style assignments, they have a very different type of language that's going to be used from, the typical letters and dialogues and other things you have maybe have been used to write during your earlier stages of your study. So using the right type of language, the right type of structure, and the right type of voice when you are writing your assignment is crucial to giving it that level of academic, standard, and making it feel considerable for presentation in an academic setting or among specialists of an area. Because if the writing style and language of your assignment slash thesis slash research article is not up to the mark, it actually damages your reputation as a researcher in the research community. So it's very important to have a certain structure, have a certain tone, and have a certain style. So obviously, if you're just starting out, it's possible that you haven't acquired that level of writing yet, but there's nothing to worry. Writing in an academic style is actually something that you can learn over time with practice and guidance and consulting the right sources. So coming to the importance of academic style is that the success on your course is also determined by your understanding of the actual course content of your discipline. So different courses might require you to use different styles or different adaptations of the same style. Characteristics of academic writing are actually to be very clear and concise. I would like to call it the ABCs of academic writing, where A stands for accuracy, which means that all the information you provide must accurately reflect the content of the sources you actually consulted for your assignment. B standing for brevity, to be brief and concise. You can include a wide range of material, but you shouldn't be going off topic and repeat the same thing over and over. Like being clear and concise also means at the same time to reduce redundancy and not repeat the same thing and not ponder off topic into an area that actually doesn't concern the assignment statement itself. And C standing for clarity, which means that you always have to make sure that the content of your assignment is easy and clear for your reader to understand. Because there's a high probability anything that's written in an academic setting could also be presented to an audience that doesn't really know the particulars of what's being talked about. So the language being very clear and very easy to follow and understand for a reader with no background of your study or your topic is something that elevates the academic standard of your writing. So this might seem like a lot, but academic writers actually are not born overnight. And a successful academic writer is the result of repeatedly reading, writing, and learning. Where reading means you take notice of writing styles and conventions of other researchers as you go through your sources, as you research materials for your assignment. You read different materials and you get a certain feel of how the material from other scholars is structured. So more reading gives you a better feel and a better grasp of the kind of language that's being used in your specific area, whether it be an assignment or a thesis or just a research or a review article. Writing is when you start to write, there's a certain lack of continuity when you're new to this. But as you write more assignments or as you write, then stop to read and rewrite certain sections of your assignment, it improves your fluency and your capability of, grasping the concept and presenting it in a better manner. So that makes you a better academic writer. And more reading and more writing also helps you to learn new vocabulary and develop a systematic approach to help you memorize things that have been unfamiliar to you previously. Now, when it comes to academic writing, the most important aspect is also to not present anything that's not your own as your own. So that's called citation. If you are referencing the work of another scholar in your assignment, you have to cite your source and let the reader know that the idea being presented is not your own. So that's called citation of an external source. So for the sake of citation, there are specific guidelines to help streamline the formats and keep uniformity. So when your assignment questions are released, there are always instructions attached to explain or specify the citation style you are required to follow. So as per my experience, the majority of courses require students to follow APA at the IOU. So it's important that you familiarize yourself with the specific citation style and the instructions and formats provided by the IOU on your course page for the APA style. If for some reason you have difficulty navigating your course page, it's always good to talk to your fellow classmates over the student forum. You can, communicate with your course instructor. If there are any resources that you would like to have but are not on your course page, you can always request for them. But before going into assignments, a thorough understanding of the specific citation manual is required to ensure proper attribution of sources. So if it's APA at the IOU, I strongly suggest that you familiarize yourself with the various citation guidelines in the APA style manual. That will help you keep track of sources. So as we previously mentioned, that the first step to writing an assignment is actually researching and gathering data or sources. So for example, if you're writing an assignment on the effect of the consumption of social media on the, let's say, the sincerity in your acts of worship. So obviously you're going to research for articles, books, or sources that somehow touch your topic. So that's going to be works of other scholars. So when you are gathering that data, downloading papers, you might come across a couple of ebooks, you might come across, review articles, you might come across maybe certain lectures which mention the topic, or maybe you come across the archive of presentations for a certain speaker or scholar who has expertise in the topic that you're going to research. It's always important to organize all the sources and have proper information, including the author, the title, the details of publication, for example, the publication house if it's a book, the year of publication, if it's a paper or an article or even a book, it also has, a year of publication. So if you have all these details and if you keep track of all these details right at the beginning, when you are downloading all your sources to later on consult during your assignment, it makes the process of citation easier later on. So what I like to, tell students is always to cite as you write. So if you're writing and if you're quoting somebody else, always put in the citation right then and there. And always copy the citation at the end of your document right then and there. So you have everything in place. So there are two types of citations. I don't know if you have already familiarized yourself with them, but they're actually in-text citations and end of document reference lists. So citing both types of sources is crucial when you're doing your assignment. In-text citations actually let the reader know within the assignment that something that's been, mentioned is the work of someone else. But in-text citations only deal with the name of the author and the year of publication. So within the text, it doesn't, give you the name of the paper or the name of the book or the journal in which the book or the paper was published, or, the volume, page numbers, and related information. So for that purpose, you have an end of document reference list. And it's always important that the number of citations in your text match the citations at the end of your assignments. So sometimes when you don't keep track of your resources that you use during your assignment, you might end up with, let's say, a 1,500 word assignment in which there are, let's say, 25 in-text citations, but you only have 5 of those citations cited at the end. So that will result in reduction of your grade, because whatever you cite in your paper has to be cited at the end in the reference list as well. So that's why keeping track of your sources is crucial to effective citation. So coming to plagiarism, plagiarism is presenting somebody else's work or idea as your own. So in order to avoid plagiarism, it's not only necessary to cite the idea from other, researchers when you include them in your assignments, but to not exactly use the sentence that they used in their paper. So you need to understand what the idea or the research being presented is, and you must be able to properly rephrase it. Or if it's something that you cannot change, for example, if you're quoting an ayah of the Quran, or if you're quoting a hadith from the Sunnah, those things are things that you cannot essentially change the words for. So then you need to properly know how to quote so that your plagiarism software doesn't flag those inclusions as plagiarism, because there is to be a certain limit when it comes to similarity. At the IOU, anything that is more than 20% will result in some kind of penalization or reduction in your grade. So you have to understand and apply proper paraphrasing methods and quoting techniques to prevent plagiarism and properly cite the ideas that are not your own. So when it comes to structuring your assignment, there's a certain flow that you are supposed to follow in general, unless specified otherwise. So you always start with an introduction, which can be a paragraph or two, in which you lay down the theoretical foundation and framework for the discussion that's going to be following. Then you go on to the paragraphs, which depending on your word limit could be 2, 3, 4 or maybe more even, but your paragraph should be focusing on a single idea or argument, should include the relevant evidence, analysis, and reasoning. So your assignment has a proper flow, and each idea or each argument should in some way relate to the one previous and lead on to the next one. So if you have certain things that you need to touch in your assignment, the body of paragraphs should be chronologically introducing those ideas where one leads into the other and the previous one paves the way for the next. And at the end, it's always good if you have the space or if you have the word limit left to provide a nice short conclusion where you summarize the main points and reiterate the evidence presented and maybe give a couple of recommendations to further reflect on the topic for other researchers. So that's the general structure of a good and concise assignment. An introduction, your body of paragraphs, and then a conclusion. Okay, so coming to things you should and shouldn't do during the assignment is always proofreading your work. Don't sit down, write your assignment, and submit it without going over it. Even very seasoned and very experienced academic writers always find some sections they can improve when they go over their articles. So when you are writing your assignment, it's a high probability that you're very satisfied with your work at that time. But if, let's say, you close it down and you say, for example, I'm going to submit this assignment in 2 days, and you, before submission, you sit down and you just, open it and go through it again, there's almost always something that you would want to change, or you now, after reading, think that you could rewrite better. So that's why proofreading your work is very important. I recommend, on average, for new writers to proofread their assignment 4 to 5 times. And if you're somewhere at the intermediate level, you have done a couple of assignments, you feel more comfortable writing, then even then you should, proofread your work 3 or at least 2 times before you are submitting it. So the usage of transitions or transitional phrases, as we like to call them, to ensure that the sentences, they relate to each other, there is harmony in your usage of language, and there is, no repetition of the same words again and again. So use different transitional phrases to connect your language from one idea to the other. Then what you shouldn't do when you're writing your assignment is rushing it. So sometimes you might have the confidence, or you might feel that maybe you can just sit down, read through the assignment, and start writing and finish everything in one go. So we don't recommend this to students because rushing through it can, halter the creative flow, and it can also have a negative impact on the research structure of your assignment overall. Because research takes time, it takes planning and management, and if you're sitting down and doing everything in one go, there are generally always things that you miss, angles that you should touch that you are unable to, simply because of the lack of time that you're putting into your assignment. So it's always good to, for example, if you're sitting down, you have written a very nice introduction, you're feeling very confident, but still, if for some reason you feel exhausted, you don't need to rush yourself or push yourself to finish your assignment right then and there, but just, leave it where it is, sometimes you might suffer from what we call writer's block. Your mind might not work in that particular area of research anymore. So it's always good to switch up, leave that one assignment and maybe start the assignment for a different course. So you have a fresh, fresh set of keywords, fresh set of articles in front of you, and your brain actually rewires yourself. There's certain biochemistry to that as well. So if you're stuck on one particular task, it's always good to, pause and then take on a different task to refresh your mind, and then later on come back and finish what you started in the first place. What you also shouldn't do is solely relying on technology. So with the advancement of technology, the availability of tools to make things easier, the introduction of artificial intelligence for writing, it's always good to use technology to your advantage to elevate the work that you actually do, but don't let technology do everything for you and have your assignment lose that personal touch, because technology is not able to translate onto paper the ideas that come from your own mind. So use technology to your advantage, but don't rely on technology only. This also comes when, for example, we've seen students, paste the assignment question into, Chat GPT or other platforms like Chat GPT, and just copy paste everything onto their assignment answer sheet and just submit it. So that not only doesn't do you any good in terms of, furthering your skills as a writer or researcher, but it would obviously also result in a loss of grade. So don't rely on technology only. Okay, when it comes to feedback, as long as your course or your institution permits, it's always good to exchange ideas, tips, and tricks for better writing with classmates or maybe seniors, online, or if you know somebody on the ground, if there's anyone among your friends or family who is a good writer, it's always good to just show them your work, get feedback, and receive constructive criticism and tips to, improve your piece. One thing that students don't make enough use of, and we have to tell them repeatedly, is consulting their course instructors. You should reach out to your instructor if you have doubts regarding the question, if you don't understand the question, if you have problems with the format, or if you have any problem in understanding the topic in general. And it's always good to seek clarification on questions you have, rather than to go in blind and risk a submission that's not relevant to what's being asked of you. So it's always good to consult your instructor when you have been given that, resource by your institution. So there are course instructors available. There are forums to ask your teacher questions, make use of them, and use those forums and platforms to, enhance your experience, rather than to be some tool you never make use of. Other than that, if you know of writing centers or maybe discussional forums on the ground, any tutoring service that you think you might need to maybe improve your writing in general, use those to get professional guidance and to refine your writing. Okay, so there are some mistakes that students make when it comes to their assignments. The biggest and most repeated being ignoring the guidelines. So students sometimes don't bother reading through the assignment question, the actual document that has the assignment question and the guidelines. So for example, if your question and the guidelines is to, let's say, write an assignment about such and such, don't exceed 1,500 words, include so and so, and let's say formatting or font size. So those things are part of the criteria based on which later on your assignment is going to be graded. So if you are ignoring those guidelines, you don't follow the guidelines, you don't keep your assignment within the said word limit, you don't use the font that it's required, or you might be using the wrong citation style. You don't bother, reading through the guidelines at the end of the assignment questionnaire, and let's say you end up using Chicago instead of APA. So even though your content, your referencing, your argument, everything is on point, failing to follow those guidelines, deliberately using the wrong citation style will still cause you to lose a portion of your grade. So it's always important to take time and go through the guidelines. And then again, if you have questions, if there's something you don't understand, you always have your forums to ask. You have your instructor forum to ask your instructor, and you should make use of those and not start writing unless all doubts in your mind have been cleared. Another mistake that young writers like to make is overgeneralization. So you might make a very broad statement regarding the thesis or the assignment topic, but you fail to present specific arguments or evidence to back up your claim. So the first and foremost thing that you should abide by when it comes to academic writing is to be concise. So that's exactly the opposite of overgeneralization. You need to be specific, and you need to specifically address the problem statement or the arguments that have been asked of you to clarify in your assignment. And when it comes to not only assignments, but later on developing research, presenting your thesis or presenting your papers in front of a live audience or a live panel who's going to evaluate you, another mistake that writers make sometimes even unconsciously is not keeping the audience in mind when you're actually writing. So you have to tailor your language, your style, and your content to suit the expectations and the level of knowledge of your readers. Okay, when it comes to revising, it's always good to review and revise your assignment before you're uploading. So you need to set aside time for revisions when you're doing your time planning, when you're setting up a timeline. For example, you have been given the deadline for each of your assignments to upload. So don't push it and leave your assignment upload for the very last day. Always, give yourself a deadline before the actual university's deadline. So for example, if the deadline for your assignment to be uploaded is the 15th of the month, you tell yourself, I'm gonna do the completion of the draft by, let's say, the 7th. I'm going to set aside 2 days to proofread, 1 day to check plagiarism, and then another 2 days to be able to apply any edits or any changes that I might have to do because of, let's say, more plagiarism than you expected or more grammatical mistakes than you thought your draft is going to have. So you always need to set aside time for revisions and never leave your task of uploading your assignment for the very last day. Because specifically when we are talking about an online learning space, it's a high possibility that a large number of students have set aside the task of uploading their assignments for the very last day. So what we have faced in that case is that due to an overload of submissions on our online learning platform, students sometimes have problems with uploading their files. Sometimes the uploads don't complete and you're left with an assignment that was completed in time, but you still couldn't upload before the deadline because of technical issues. So always aim to upload your draft a couple of days before the actual university's deadline in order to avoid such issues. Always check for consistency. Read through your assignment, and if you feel that there's a disconnect between the different sections, go back and fix those. And when it comes to interdisciplinary research or very technical research, it's also always good to have someone either in your online community or someone in your friends or family circle to look at your, work and give you insights. Okay, so you have a final checklist that you should be, applying to all your assignments, where you, first of all, check your format, verify that your assignment is adhering to the required formatting guidelines, including the font style, the size, the margins, and the indents. You always have to double check your citations to ensure that you cited every source. Your in-text citations match the citations at the end of your assignment in your reference or bibliography. And always confirm that you have fulfilled all the requirements for your submission. Double check that you're within the required word limit, double check that you have used the right citation style, and double check your deadlines and avoid last minute issues. So in conclusion, effective assignment writing is essential for your academic success, not only as a student, but as a researcher later on. Continuous practice and utilization of the guidelines will improve your writing over time. Your first couple of assignments might seem like a huge task, but once you get the hang of it, it's not going to be as difficult anymore. You're not going to be consuming as much time per assignment anymore. And you're going to be more proficient and more consistent in following a certain process when it comes to each assignment for each course. And assignment writing or academic writing is not just something that you need when you are submitting an assignment, but as a researcher / student of knowledge, it's vital for future professional activities. And the skills that you acquire as a student during your degree, when you're doing all these assignments, are bound to be of use when, for example, later on, some of you go into like teaching, some of you might go into research, some of you might stay in academia, some of you might go out into the industry, learn to mentor other students, so you pass on the knowledge that you have acquired. So it's always a process of lifelong learning when it comes to research and writing up research. So those are techniques that are always going to be useful beyond the classroom. Don't forget to make use of additional resources such as writing manuals that have been provided to you by your university. Online tools that you might find on your course page. Maybe you have an ebook library that's been provided to you. Maybe you have certain subscriptions for softwares that have been provided to you. So make use of additional resources that are within your reach. Attend writing workshops, attend seminars, any free resources, any books that enable you to gain additional insights and engage with other people in the community which have better skills than you. So you learn from them and then you pass on the knowledge to other people who might just be starting out. And you have moved on to, let's say, a couple of steps above the people who have just been starting out. So this was it for the presentation. Now I would like to invite any questions or any comments that our listeners might have. You can type them into the chat box and I will answer the questions one by one. Okay, the first question that we have is there any difference between reference and citation? You are actually citing references. Citing means mentioning them in your something, and I am telling somebody else what that person told me. I'm citing that person. But I'm referencing to what that person said. So citation is the mentioning of or the giving of references. So one is essential, a continuity of the other. I hope that clears it up. If there's further explanation, just let me know. Or let me explain it a little more in case other people have a similar question. So references and citations are kind of the same thing. It's closely related, but the purpose is a little different. So the citation is what you briefly mentioned in your research, and the reference is the full information that you give at the end. So what you're mentioning in text is a citation. You're just letting the reader know that what you're mentioning is not yours. It belongs to someone else. It belongs to that and that person. But you don't give up the full information of what resource it actually was. Was it a book? What was the title? Blah, blah, blah. But you're just making a mention of, like, this is not my own idea. This is from somebody else. Whereas the reference is the full information regarding your citation at the end of your document. So it's kind of the same thing, but the purpose is different. So I hope that, clears it up. Okay. The next question is, how do we cite verses of the Quran and Hadith? So depending on the word limit, you can cite the Arabic as well as the translation when it comes to Quran and Hadith. But if you feel that citing the Arabic along with the English translation would cause you to take up more, words than you have for your assignment, then it's best to just stick to the translation. And as a citation, you mention Al-Quran, then you mention the surah number, and then you mention the ayah number. And when it comes to referencing the Quran at the end of your assignment, you actually have to reference the precise translation that you used. So there are lots of different translations out there. So if you're taking your translation from, let's say, Sahih International, it's got to be some version of Sahih International. It's going to be an ebook, the Quran, and it's going to be, let's say, Sahih International translation, but it's going to be obviously published by some book publisher. It's going to have a year of publication. So you mentioned the ayah and the chapter and the verse in your text, but at the end you actually provide full information of the exact book of translation that you used. So that's how you cite verses of the Quran, and the same goes for Hadith. And I always urge students to not just take verses of the Quran and Hadith from websites, copy paste them, but actually download a copy of the Quran with translation in PDF and follow the translation from that particular book, and then reference that book at the end of your assignment, like that particular translation of the Quran. Or maybe you can download, let's say, Al-Bukhari, which has been, summarized by a certain scholar. So you download that, and then when you are citing a hadith from that book, you actually get to reference that particular book at the end of your assignment. Okay. The next question is, till when do we have to submit the assignment and what's the topic for the assignment? So when you go to your student dashboard, you actually have your academic calendar, and your academic calendar actually mentions the specific date when your assignment topics or questions are released. So before that date, you actually are unable to see your assignment on your course page. But after that date, alongside your modules, you will be able to click on the assignment, download the assignment question, and then you will find out what the topic is. So that's something that depends on the date in your calendar. So you have to look that one up. I hope that clarifies it. Are there other questions? Okay, I just missed another question. How do I quote the Quran in APA format? It's simple, like I mentioned. When it's an in-text citation, you just cite the chapter number and the verse number in italics, in a bracket, for example. And for example, let's say you are quoting the 10th ayah of the second chapter. So you are going to put in bracket Al-Quran 2:10, comma, and then you are just going to mention the translation used. For example, Sahih International. And when it comes to the end of document reference, you are going to reference the precise book of translation you used in the same way that you would reference any other book published by any other, publishing house. As for the in-text citation, you're going to Al-Quran or just Quran, your chapter number, your verse number, followed by a comma, and then the translation that you used. Okay. Where are we supposed to put a declaration for plagiarism? After the cover page or after citation? What do you mean by declaration for plagiarism? Is that something that you are required to include in your assignments by default? Because I haven't seen that. When it's a research, when it's a thesis, then that might be a question. But for assignments, you're usually not required to put any sort of, declaration on your assignment. So for assignments, that usually that's not the case. For your thesis, your declarations actually come after the cover page, but before your contents. So you would have your cover page, then maybe you would have your dedication, then you would maybe have your declaration, and then you would have, the table of contents when it's a thesis. But in an assignment of a page or two, or 12 to 1500 words, there usually isn't space or a need for a declaration. I hope that clears it up. Now, moving on to the next question. What is the difference between bibliography and reference? Well, although the terms bibliography and reference are often used in place of one another, the meanings are actually different. So you might hear people using the word bibliography where they should be using the word reference, and using the word reference where they should be using bibliography, but it's both of them have separate meanings. So when it comes to reference, a reference is simply a list of sources that were cited in your work directly. So you have your in-text citations, and then you have the end of document reference list, where each citation is also mentioned in its entirety at the end. So for example, if you cited 10 different scholars in your document, then you have 10 in-text citations and exactly 10 references at the end. So that is a reference. A bibliography is actually a more loose term, where it only includes a list of sources that you consulted or read. You don't necessarily cite them in your research work directly. So for example, you might read a couple of books on a certain topic, but you don't exactly cite a specific fact from that book. But you might get a certain understanding of the topic from reading that book. So you have consulted it. Your consultation of that book has shaped your understanding of the idea and helped you to express your understanding of the idea. So you're going to give a bibliography at the end, which means this is a list of all the sources that I consulted, but not necessarily cited directly. So that is the slight difference between a bibliography list and a reference list. I hope that explains it. The next question is, if it is long, can we paraphrase it and give reference? Obviously, if something that you want to cite or something that you want to include in your assignment is a rather long string of ideas or facts from another scholar, it's always good to maybe summarize it in your own words and give an in-text citation. So if it's, for example, a paragraph that you read and you feel that everything related in this paragraph is a good fit for your assignment, it's still more advisable to paraphrase it or summarize it into 1 or 2 sentences in your own words and then provide an in-text citation for it. So that's more efficient, basically, instead of just paraphrasing the whole thing and unnecessarily repeating the same in another paragraph that's going to come after it. Okay, should we all do our assignments in Word program? So what type of word processor you use depends on you. Obviously, the widely used word processor is Microsoft Word. It has the best compatibility. It has, I think, the most flexible. It's the easiest to use, the easiest to understand. Comes with a variety of add-ons such as Grammarly or EndNote that you can actually install and use while you are using your Word. So I think the best recommended is the Word program. But if for some reason you are comfortable in using another word processor, such as AbiWord, or there are a couple of other popular ones, I'm sure, you don't necessarily need to use Word. But always make sure that the file format in which your word processor, your software, your writing software saves the file is something that's compatible when you upload it. So if your software does not save your work in a doc format, then I wouldn't recommend using it. Because converting from one file format into another one is going to maybe distort your formatting, change your arrangement of paragraphs. It might, disorganize your, indents. And a formatted document, when uploaded and shown at the online platform as not formatted, can still, cause you to lose some part of your grade. So even if you're using a different software or a different package, a different software package, if you're not using Office 365, Microsoft Office, just make sure that you're actually saving your file in a compatible format. So answering your question, no, it's not necessary to use Word, but it's necessary to use the correct file format. Okay. Can you give a brief description on how to fill and upload the plagiarism declaration form? I think the plagiarism declaration form and related guidelines are provided on your course page, what you're expected to fill, where you're expected to upload it. Then again, if you have any questions for a particular, course, you can always ask your instructor, and your instructor would be happy to, clarify any doubts. Okay, another question is, usually I do in-text citations and provide reference, but still the tool will mark it as plagiarism, even though it's in quotation marks. So that happens sometimes. It even happens that if you submit an assignment, and let's say in one of the later courses, you may submit another assignment on a similar, topic. The plagiarism software does actually also show similarity against your own work. So if there's an assignment of yours uploaded in the database, and you upload a similar assignment of yours again, then your second upload will actually be flagged as plagiarized because you already have a similar upload in the system. So that's just sadly how plagiarism softwares operate. And also, despite properly referencing or putting certain things, for example, Quranic verses or hadith in quotation marks, plagiarism software still might flag it as similarity. In that case, always address that directly to your course instructor. Provide proof that what you referenced is actually something that has to go in word for word. You can't rephrase it. And tell your instructor, manually. Get in touch with your instructor, and whatever your instructor then recommends, just follow the instructions of your instructor. So if your instructor says, okay, it's fine, just go on and upload it and just leave a note, then do that. If your instructor tells you something else, then just do whatever your instructor says, but make sure that you consult with your instructor if you have that kind of a problem, so that if there's an automatic detection of high similarity, you can then at least, present your case and let, the relevant authority know that you brought it up before submission, so that it doesn't result in a deduction of your grade. Okay, are there any other questions? For now, I think I'm through all the questions that have been submitted. If we have more questions, then okay. If it's a long question we want to quote, if it's a long passage we want to quote, can we paraphrase it and give reference? Yes, I I answered this question previously. I think it's a repeat question. If it's a long passage that you want to quote, you can paraphrase it and give reference, but while you are paraphrasing it, maybe you can also aim to, shorten it a little bit. Paraphrasing doesn't always necessarily mean that if it's 10 sentences, it needs to be exactly 10 sentences. You can also combine two sentences into one, combine two related ideas into a single sentence. Try to, shorten it up a little bit so you don't struggle with, going over the word limit at the end. Okay, there is a requirement now to include a plagiarism declaration for assignments. Okay, if there is a requirement, then your declaration comes right after your cover page. Like after your cover page, the second thing you're going to include is a plagiarism declaration, and then you're going to start the assignment if it's needed in the same document, actually. If there is a need to separately upload that, then obviously it's going to be a separate document and it's going to be uploaded separately. Okay, how do you find hadith in IOU library? Obviously, if you're browsing the IOU library, you are gonna have to search for certain titles by name, or just look in the section of hadith and see what books you find. Otherwise, there are a lot of online libraries. I can type something here. There is Kalamullah, which is a library. It's called kalamullah.com. And it's a huge online database of lots and lots of Quranic translations in the form of ebooks. There is a lot of ahadiths in huge volumes, translations, abridged summaries, commentaries. There are many books on contemporary issues from reputable scholars. So it's a huge resource and it's free. So you can use that as well. Always look for free resources before you look for paid ones, in my opinion. Okay, I just got a notification that there are no more questions. So we can close the Q&A now. Barakallahu feekum for all your questions. Thank you very much for attending the session. I wish you all the best with future assignments. And remember, while it might seem a little overwhelming at the beginning, good writing is a skill that can be developed and refined with time if you practice good enough and if you dedicate yourself to acquiring that skill. So inshallah, even if you at a beginner's level or an intermediate level right now, with practice, with dedication, with the right intention, with actually giving time to refining your skill, there's a high probability that you are going to be a much, much better writer, let's say in your third semester, as compared to the kind of writer you were in your first. And by the time you're in your fifth semester or in your final semester, if you keep applying what you learn all across the board, then I think as you go to your final, semester and take on your thesis, you find that it's going to be pretty easy for you. Obviously, it's going to be more elaborate than a simple assignment, but if you apply everything that you learned along the way, even finishing your thesis in your last semester is not going to be a hard task. But the key is always dedication, consistency, and also looking for new skills, new tools, and new platforms, new discussions, and new forums that might equip you with more tips, more insights, and more practice to refine your writing skills. And it's always good to, if there are any questions, no question is too small, no question is too stupid to ask. So if you have doubts in your mind, if you have a question regarding anything and you think there's somebody out there who has the answer, don't hesitate to ask. Ask your fellows, ask your co-workers, ask your peers, ask your instructors, ask your fellow researchers, and there's always something new that you can learn and apply along the way. So this is it from my side. Once again, Jazakallah khairan for attending. Barakallah feekum. May Allah put barakah in all your efforts, make your journey an easy one, an enriching one, and a fulfilling one, and enable you to further apply and disseminate everything that you learn for the benefit of the ummah, and to further your journey of knowledge and to spread the word of knowledge among others. So I hand it over to our host to close the session and give some concluding remarks. Jazakallah khairan, barakallah fikum.
Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much, sister, for your very, very insightful and beneficial talk. And may Allah increase us all in the beneficial knowledge. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Fi amanillah, everybody. And Jazakallah khairan once again.
Thank you, sisters. Jazakallah khair. May Allah increase you in Iman.